Welcome back to another episode of KKC Consulting. With me today, I have Qazah. He's come all the way from EY. He's a manager over there, so we're really lucky to have him today. And yeah, let's just get started. Qazah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Amar, it's great being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course, of course. Honestly, just get started. I'll toss over the mic to you. Do you mind giving a little synopsis of yourself?
Yeah, so my background, like a lot of people, is immigrant family. Parents came for their children's higher education, and alhamdulillah, that's kind of was very similar for me as well. Came here in grade 8 in the Mississauga area, and I did my middle school grade 8 there, did my high school there at Stephen Lewis Secondary School, which was new at the time.
Oh, SLSS.
SLSS.
Yeah.
Not so much new anymore, but I was the second graduating class.
Really?
Now what is a long time ago, right?
Wow.
But I mean, and it's funny because even to this day, I can be indecisive, and I was very indecisive back then, and not much has changed. And at high school, I did my part. Obviously, I was a very focused student. My wife laughs at me because she's like, "You never skip class," and I'm like, "No, I actually didn't skip class. I like going to class. I like going to gym class. And I didn't even do spares in grade 12, not just because I wanted to learn and I wanted to take all these courses. And really, it was when I was applying for universities, I didn't know what to do. So I applied for 11 places. On OUAC, my parents spent the $50 per application for each of them. And even then it was like, okay, I'll do engineering, but I have 3 schools for engineering. If I do business, I want to have 3 schools for business. So I have options, even within options, right? And what's funny is that engineering became kind of what I wanted to do, not because that's what I really wanted to do, but it was more so because it had a clear path. There was direction, right? Life science, it was like, okay, you do 3 or 4 years, then you have to figure out what you want to do afterwards.
Right.
Business, you do it. To be still honest, I still sometimes don't really understand what business people do. But in all seriousness, though, engineering was like, okay, 4 years and you get a job. And I'm like, sign me up. That is simple enough. I'll do my 4 years and I'll get a job, right? And alhamdulillah, that's actually more or less how it worked out. I ended up at U of T. A lot of my friends went to McMaster just because it was closer on the west side of Mississauga. It's closer, just take a bus and go there. But I took the opportunity to come downtown and actually learn how the streets of downtown work. But it was a lot of it was a great experience overall. I think in hindsight, if I'm being very honest, the Waterloo program is better from a co-op perspective. I think they do a good job. You're able to get a lot of breadth into a lot of different companies, and I think in a way that's beneficial because you could try a couple different places before you finally decide once you graduate where you want to go. They do a good job. With U of T, it's 3 years of education, and then you can take a full year off to do work. So it's a 12 to 16-month internship, paid internship, and then you do your 4th year, and then you graduate, and you.
Oh, so a total of 5 year, but one is.
But one is
see.
So it's where Waterloo might be like 4 months school, 4 months work, 8 months school, 8 months work, things like that nature. U of T just kind of does it all in one go after 3 years, right? So with that, I was at a company called Celestica. They were a manufacturing company. If you've heard of the Kobo, you know about the Kobo readers, the original Xbox, they were the manufacturer for it.
I see.
So if you have heard of Foxconn, they make the iPhones, right? Apple designs the iPhones, but Foxconn makes the iPhones. So it's a similar concept. That's what Celestica used to do. At its peak, they had 7,000 employees in the GTA. They were, I think, the 3rd largest employer in the GTA.
Wow.
Those were before my years. When I joined, you could see the history in the building. Honestly, I think they had 2,000 employees or thereabouts when I came back, and that was after they had gone really low. Then they increased. They started making solar panels, and there was government rebates. So there was, they found their new niche in the market. And so now, if you ever go to Don Mills, Eglinton area, where Celestica used to be, it's all been sold off. It's all now commercial, residential buildings. It was a huge property. It was a huge property.
I mean, 7,000 employees, it must be massive, right?
Yeah, the parking spots. It was, and it was quite the experience. Like just seeing like you saw and you were like, wow, this place used to be huge. And I can go on about that experience itself, but I mean, I did that. It was in supply chain, so very business oriented. Funny enough, I did that for about 16 months. I went back to school, did my 4th year, and honestly, I was applying for jobs and I wasn't getting I wasn't really getting anywhere either with the opportunities, unfortunately. So, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finds a way for you, right? It's funny because I remember a conversation I had when I was in Celestica. I was on the subway going to work or coming back from work, either one, going to work or going home, and I met one of my colleagues, and she's like, "Yeah, I work at a company called Dayforce," and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool," and she was telling me about it. I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome! I'd love to work there at some point." And it's funny how sometimes you say those words, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts it in place that
Yeah.
it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Literally 2 years later, I got in touch with her. She's like, "Hey, I'll refer you." And Alhamdulillah, I got the opportunity. I remember just doing the interviews, they went well. I joke that I got hired on potential. I kid you not many people know about the industry for HR transformation and um, or human capital management is also known as. And I didn't, right, going into it. Obviously now this year will be 10 years being in the industry. So it's you just learn through the job, you learn
Mm-hmm.
the industry, and you really grow into it. So alhamdulillah for everything there. It led me to 7 years of Dayforce. Dayforce is one of the vendors, just for awareness, of one of the HR technologies available. If you've heard of ADP, Workday, Oracle HCM, SAP SuccessFactors, UKG, formerly Ultimate Software and Kronos Group,
Mm-hmm.
separate companies, they merged into one. Uh, they're these HR technology providers, right? They're basically like your software companies, but these are the software that HR uses to um, to manage your pay increase. For example, you get a merit increase, they update the system. Now your next paycheck will be having more pay, and and
I see.
ultimately you get paid through the bank. But that's the system that says, hey, this is how much this person needs to be paid. Release the funds, that kind of thing. It's the same system where you request vacation time. It
Mm-hmm.
it tells you, hey, you have 15 days of vacation or 20 days of vacation. I want to request vacation. I put in a request in the system. It goes through a workflow to my manager. They'll approve it, and so on and so forth. Same thing with benefits. Same thing with like benefit options. If you if you have a spouse, if you have a child, you can pick the family option or the single for your dental, medical, so on
Right.
and so forth. So this system does all of that, and
Mm-hmm.
we implement the system for different companies.
I see. So essentially, it's almost, sorry, excuse me, almost an internal workspace where employees can, ask for time off, or they can record their bonuses, for example, like you mentioned, the credit system as well. It's just everything like all in one
Yeah,
internally, right?
exactly. So it 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 acts as that space. When you apply for jobs, you'll
Mm-hmm.
see sometimes you'll see like the Workday logo or stuff.
Yeah.
If you've ever had to apply for a job and you've had to put in your resume and then put in into details explicitly copy paste your text onto it,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably Workday. And I'm joking,
Wow.
but no, it's true. It's true. Some of these systems are they'll consume data and automatically pre-populate, right? Others they'll ask you to actually re-enter your information. So
Mm-hmm.
it really depends in that
Mm-hmm.
capacity.
That's awesome, and I'm glad, I mean, number one, congratulations, almost 10 years, which
Yeah,
is awesome.
alhamdulillah.
Like, alhamdulillah, it's great. Looking back, you can just see how much you've learned over the years, and it's always a really nice reflective reminder, even for myself. Again, don't have 10 years, but just looking back in grade 12, how much I knew versus now.
For sure.
Again, a long way to go, but it's always nice to kind of see, all right, I went one level ahead, which is awesome. But moving on, let's talk about your education, right?
For sure.
Completely engineering, and then now pretty recently came into EY as a senior consultant, moving into becoming a manager.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the transition going from engineering to business?
It's it's a change. It's actually really cool because my sister used to work at EY,
I
and
see.
she was in audit, and she started in the staff, worked her way up to a manager as well, and she left a few months before I joined. It's funny,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the EY swag I have is because of her. I had the EY bottles to the point where I remember I did the interview and I kind of like I intentionally had the bottle
I
to try to be like, yo,
see.
look at me as I'm drinking water in the middle of it, just for to try and have that conversation. But
Hmm.
kind of going back to your question, it's a change. Engineering is very technical heavy. Even the writing, right? A lot of even high school, we call it fluff, so to speak, but it's like, hey, welcome to let me introduce the topic, et cetera, et cetera. So you're trying to put a story, whereas engineering is literally like, you have 500 words and you have to put this entire thing in that, be very succinct, be very straight to the point. So the writing style is different. Now, engineering was good, at least because from a technical standpoint, I'm technically inclined. It was good. Afterwards, though, going from there to Dayforce, Ceridian, Dayforce. Now, it used to be Ceridian. They changed their name to Dayforce. So going to Dayforce, also technical in nature. So learning the system, learning the way it works, the different issues that come up, because it's all configuration based. But it was right up my alley. I was able to learn it well, and alhamdulillah, it's been a blessing. I know it quite well at this point. Don't get me wrong, there's still something to learn, and there's still things I learn every day, but it's kind of that climb, you're able to kind of initially, you're able to pick up a lot on it. Now, coming to EY was interesting because, one, I actually really wanted to come to EY, just because my sister was here, and for me it was, while it doesn't bother me that much that I wasn't a part of these big four, there still was the look. And even today, even I walk up Bay Street and I'm like, wow, man, subhanAllah, like this is so cool. I can't believe I work downtown. I can't believe I work at in a big four. Like, this is so cool. This still happens up to today. And I tell the people that are coming in that this is, like, you're fortunate, you're starting here. Like, I had to come here afterwards. And and it's so, kind of going back to your question, I apologize. I'm going through a couple of different places.
I love tangents, yeah.
But that transition was incredible. And I thought I knew a lot about Dayforce. I was like, yep, we have a Dayforce practice at EY. How different could it possibly be, right? But coming in, I realized that EY really helps sharpen you. It helps sharpen your skills in terms of like the soft skills, especially, right? I never really created PowerPoint presentations, decks for that matter, at Dayforce. Or if it was very simple. It was like, let me put some pictures, let me just put some text here. Don't care about formatting, don't care about alignment, don't care about visually how it looks. Usually a lot of text, you know what I mean? And it was just to get the point across to the client, like, hey, this is how the system works, like you're good to go, right? Now, Dayforce themselves have done a lot better since then, don't get me wrong. But that was new. To me, that was new. I had to learn visually what looks appealing in a slide deck, right? A lot of times, the final output isn't always tangibly the system. From an implementation project, yes, it will be, but sometimes it's strategy related. How can you guys schedule better your employees, for example? And the output of that is advisory work. The output ends up being a PowerPoint presentation. It's not a system configuration. And so you realize the value of making sure that your decks are in good shape. They provide the right amount of information for the right type of audience, right? You think about, sometimes you're presenting to the C-suite, and as a result, it's very focused on impact, and you're not going to be too wordy with it, because ultimately they want to know, how are you improving efficiency? How much does this cost to me? And overall, what are the benefits that I'm going to get, right? And they don't need to go into the details. So some of these things I picked up on as I got into EY. There was that aspect to it. The second was just a type of work. I had never done proposal work before. Like Dayforce had their own sales team, and they're the ones who are trying to find clients, who are trying to find contracts.
All of them, right?
Exactly. Whereas the first week I came, they put me on a proposal. I was in the middle of orientation, I think day 2 or day 3, and they're like, yeah, Qazah, you're going to work on this proposal. And I'm like, okay, I've never done one. But at the same time, like, tell me how I can help, and I will provide my expertise. I know Dayforce. I can talk to you about Dayforce. But, that was a cool experience. And that's one of the changes that were there. That the way you interact with clients, I think it's a lot more client-focused. Dayforce, you almost see through the lens of Dayforce, where a client has an issue, and you'll either like, yeah, the system can do it this way, or no, the system can't do it. System can't do it, client, go figure it out yourself, right? Here, that's not where the conversation would stop. The conversation would be, okay, we know the system can't help you, but technology is one part of the solution. There's still people and process. We say people, process, technology. So technology can't help you, that's fine. But between people and process, you may still be able to solve this outside of the system, and I can develop the process that you need in order to make sure you're still able to accomplish the task that needs to be done. Right? When earlier we was talking about using technology for requesting time off, well, maybe they can't use the system for one reason or another. All right, well, what other workflow options are there? What other technologies are there? Can you email at its basic level? That is also a technology, right?
Right, right.
And you'd be surprised at kind of what technologies people like. Sometimes clients are using Excel sheets, so that also happens to do their time tracking, right?
Oh,
And it
wow.
happens. It happens.
Wow.
Yeah,
Doesn't that take a lot of time?
it does. It's not efficient, but that's why these systems make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I apologize going to a tangent.
No, no
Going
worries.
back to your question about the transition from Dayforce to EY, just some of the main highlights, right? Ultimately, very new experience. I knew the technical side of Dayforce really well, and technically I was inclined. That was never the concern. The pieces I needed to work on were more soft skills related, in terms of presentations, creating my own, like leading presentations, creating my own decks for PowerPoints, presenting in front of the client, creating a pros cons list. Hey client, here are your decisions. Let me provide the pros cons. Here's EY's recommendation, and then you decide how you want to proceed. Right? A lot of times we necessarily wouldn't go down that full level of analysis back in Dayforce. And as you go up as you grow in your career, you realize it's a few different factors at play. You've got the technical side, there is client communication side, there's also risk management, right, and managing expectations with clients. You don't have enough resources, for example, to complete a task. Call out that risk early. Don't leave it to the last day. You
Right.
call the risk out early, you still have time to mitigate that risk. You call out the risk early, you should also be coming with a mitigation strategy. What can you do to make sure this does not become an issue? And as you kind of grow into the role, those are some of the things you're also thinking about. The way you're delivering a messaging to the client. They could take your words, spin it a different way, and say, "Hey, you told us this, but that's not really how you meant it," and so on and so forth. So those are some of the factors I think that sharpen you, uh, as as an employee, but also as you grow in your career. I think those are some of the skills that he was extremely good at.
Right. And, another thing I wanted to touch on, you talked about this earlier on, but your love for learning, right? It's very, very apparent ever since high school how you said you didn't take any spares. I wish I was like that. But I love my spares a lot. Like it was fantastic. But anyway, just being able to have the enjoyment for learning, carrying it on later on, and especially going from such a technical role, uh, like from an engineering background to coming into EY, practicing those soft skills and the whole growth element over there, would you say that all of that combined is one of the reasons you were able to get promoted so fast, like going from senior consultant to manager?
I think part of it was, alhamdulillah, the client communication piece I had coming into EY.
Mm-hmm.
Technical skills I definitely had coming into EY.
Yeah.
They, when I joined, they would say the EY way, and I didn't understand what that meant, and no one
Right.
really explained it to me either in that regard. No offense, EY folks, let me know if you did tell me. I apologize. But more seriously, though, with the EY way, those were the soft skills that I was talking about. How do you manage a client? How do you develop a pro cons list? How do you try and guide them towards a certain decision? Uh, how do you present your ideas? How and how do you manage the client? Risk management would be a part of it. Those are some of the factors that were just lacking, and it's like within a year I was able to uh, check off some of those items.
Mm-hmm.
I did a bit of a PM role as well, looking at the
Oh,
project
really?
finances. Wasn't a big project, but I mean, again, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, and now I
Fast-paced
understand.
learning,
Yeah,
right?
I
Mm-hmm.
understand this piece. This is also important. From uh, project planning is such a huge component,
Mm-hmm.
right? And learn that piece, great. Managing project finances, learn that piece, great. And again, I'm not saying I'm an expert at it. Actually, by any means, I'm not. What I'm saying is I've now have the taste of it. Now have the opportunity to know how to think about
Exactly,
these
right.
concepts,
And
right?
that's another great thing because from my knowledge, EY also allows you to practice in different programs within the firm itself.
Yeah,
You can get certifications to learn other things.
yeah,
And I feel at the end of the day, they're really just investing in their employees and their workers because the more human capital they have, the smarter they are, the more talented they are, the better it is for the system itself.
It's really interesting because EY services, right? How do they make money? And the way they do it is they sell a service, consulting or audit work, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It is in EY's best interest that they invest in you. By them investing in you and by you learning more skills, they have now the opportunity to charge the client more money for the work that you
Exactly.
do.
Right.
So it's a direct relationship, right? It's very different in industry when you work in organizations because they might see it as a cost. Here, it's yes, you are now technically more expensive to pay. However, you're also more you're billable at a higher
More
rate
valuable. Right.
to the client. So
Mm-hmm.
it works in both ways, and you can't promote someone too fast because they won't have the skills necessary, and it's hard as from a business standpoint to say this person
Justify it,
to
right?
justify to the client
Mm-hmm.
because the client might be like, no, this person, why are you charging me this much money for this person when this person can't even do X, Y, and Z?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that balance at the same
And
time.
that's fair. And it's another really interesting thing that just came up to me right now. Usually when you see people who are at EY at the Big Four, they spend a long time there, right? So for these companies to invest in their workers, again,
Yeah.
ultimately in their best interest, just because since they're there for such a long time, obviously they're going to learn at two, three, maybe even fourfold if you're able to give those resources to them at such an early stage. Because at the end of the day, learning is almost like an exponential graph, right?
Yeah. And honestly, it's like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is a lot of work, right? I'm
Right.
not going to say it can be. It is a lot of work straight, right? But you see the results at the same time. And it when you implement different clients or if you're working on a different multiple projects, you're learning something new on each of those projects, and that you're getting those experiences very, very fast. It's like, and I'm not saying it's a dark replacement because it's not, but it's almost like you're working in so many places at the same time almost
Mm-hmm.
by having those constant project changes.
I see. So it's almost as if you're a chef and you're in charge of so many different dishes because you get a taste of everything,
Exactly.
right?
Right, you could go and specialize in one, for
Mm-hmm.
example. Well, I mean, that analogy could fall, but being at the client side or working on a big project as a whole. But that's really what allows people to grow so fast in the roles. In terms of people staying, I think it's everyone's personal decision and how they want to grow their careers. I think everyone needs to realize what works for them
Mm-hmm.
ultimately. And I've met partners who've been there for 20 years, 30 years, and it's incredible. You look, being like, wow, you've been here since before I was born. So that has
No,
happened.
it's
That
oh my
happens.
God, it happens. I don't mean to cut off your
No,
tangent,
go
but
for it.
when I was speaking to David Fabian, right? Very fantastic guy.
Yeah.
He's absolutely brilliant. The way he communicates and the way you can tell his sales skills are top notch as well, right? But the point that I'm trying to get across is that when he came to the room and I sat down, that's when I really let it sit in. I'm talking to someone with more experience times two than my age.
It happens.
And it's it's a little bit crazy because it facilitates a conversation where I can learn so much. And just the fact that, at that time I was 17 years old and I was learning from someone with that many years of experience, if I come in with an inquisitive mindset, an inquisitive way of asking, imagine how many people online are going to then be able to say, "Oh, yo, if a 17-year-old understands it and, obviously it would take me more time than a 21-year-old, this information was really valuable for myself." And that's awesome because that's when it really got me thinking like, "Oh, yo, this podcast, it could really help a lot of people. It could
Yeah.
really be a sort of way for them to not only break into these amazing companies, but also to build their own skills and to build their own network." Which actually leads me to my next question. What advice would you have for someone who wants to break into the Big Four and I guess specifically EY?
It's a funny. It's I laugh because it didn't work. That's not how it worked for me, right? Like
Mhm,
I came in as an experienced hire, and so my advice is different. My advice is, don't actually stop trying
mhm,
to come into the Big Four. If you want that experience, ultimately, it you may not get the job. And I mean, we get a ton of applicants. Obviously, not everyone makes it, right? It's really structured the way EY goes about their recruiting. It's very impressive at the same time. But I look at some of the people that get hired, and I'll be very honest. I look at them and the people we get coming in, and I'm like, yeah, I wasn't at that level. When I was graduating, I'm very frank about this. But that doesn't mean you can't be later on,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
I came after 7 years of Dayforce. I was like, I know EY has this practice. I know a few folks that are there. I'm going to give it a chance. I'm going to give it a chance and we'll see how it goes, right? So even though you may not, I'm going to give you the opposite advice. I'm going to say, even if you don't get into the big four, that doesn't mean the door is closed. It means like, if you work towards the skills that are needed within these practices, technology consulting, audit work, HR consulting, where I am, but there's also business consulting. There's a few different avenues out there.
Mm-hmm.
If you grow even your technical skills and you understand that space well, it will create opportunities for
Mm-hmm.
you. And that's really the advice that I can
Right.
give.
It's a great advice, and I appreciate you for talking about that. There's one question I do want to ask you though.
Absolutely.
Have you watched this movie called Three Idiots?
I have.
Yeah, so there's this one quote that they have, and it's a common theme throughout the entire movie, but Amir Khan, he says it during the end.
Yeah.
And essentially his quote was, don't chase after money, chase after excellence, because when you chase after excellence, then money follows you,
Yeah.
right? And that idea, I feel, summarizes your advice perfectly, because many people sometimes get lost for the status, for the power, for the money,
Yeah.
but they don't realize that at the end of the day, if you just focus on yourself, then people are just going to come flocking towards you, right? If you continuously learn, it's at the end of the day going to help you.
And that's really the advice. Build your skill set, right? It becomes interesting when you get into the corporate world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Obviously, you're looking for a promotion, you're looking for that next level. You do want that title, you do want that pay increase, but you also got to realize that I'm not going to say you have to enjoy the job that you're doing. You should
Mm-hmm.
try to, but I'm not going to say you have to.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say is those things are secondary in a sense that they may or may not happen, right? You
Mm-hmm.
may get promoted, you may not get promoted. But the time you are spending in that role, you should be learning something.
Mm-hmm.
You should learn something. And whether that's understanding a client better, whether that's learning more about the retail industry, or depending on where the client is. In my case right now, it's manufacturing, right? Uh, you should be picking up some skills to some capacity,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's technical, whether it's more soft skills. But that really is the advice, because the thing is, at the end of the day, that will stay with you wherever you
Exactly.
go.
Yeah. And there's this beautiful word. It's in Arabic. It's called ihsan. I'm not sure if you've heard of it,
Yeah,
but it's the idea that whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter how menial the task might be, make sure you're doing it as if God is watching you, or AKA, in other words, make sure you're doing it with full excellence to the best of your
100%.
abilities, right? Doesn't matter how small it might be, whether, you're distributing some tasks for an intern, or perhaps you're helping your mom out by cleaning the kitchen, whatever it might be, just make sure you're putting your best foot forward, and you'll see the dividends come in afterwards. You'll see, yourself learning, you'll see the new connections that you make. Try not to cut corners, because if you can cut corners on the small things, then you'll 100% cut them in the big things. Force of habit, right?
Yeah.
And I really love that word. I heard it first from my boss, Abdul Mateen, actually. So shout out to him. But he really did inspire me to look into it and really understand, am I doing enough work for what perhaps I've been hired to do, right? Like, am I really working to the best of my abilities? And sure, a lot of people can take that with a negative side of things, like, no, I'm working hard enough, right? But if you could flip that and say, okay, maybe I'm not working the hardest, but I can work more. Going back to the whole potential thing, right? You mentioned you got hired due to your potential.
That's what I say. I mean, it's kind of hard to say someone got a job when they have no background in the industry, they have no previous work experience, right? But that's what I say. Like,
Hmm.
potential is a big factor
It
on
is.
it, because that determines your ceiling. If someone has a low ceiling,
Hmm.
it's hard to give them a role. It's hard to give them not a job, but like that's what limits you. But if
Hmm.
you have a high ceiling, it's just a matter of then putting in the effort using the resources that you have to try and support you to reach that potential. And I think it's, even in my role now, it's the imposter syndrome is real.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's real. It happens at all levels. I look at, and frankly, I look at the rates that the clients are paying for my services, and I'm like, yo, do I actually, like, do I have that knowledge? Do I have that
Right.
skill set to justify what clients are paying
Mm-hmm.
for my services at EY? And it's like, bro, that's heavy. Like, it's
Right.
heavy. And it takes a while for a person to feel more confident in that and be like, no, I feel like I do know, and I am worth what they're paying me because of X, Y, and Z reason. But it takes time for a person to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that, you're like, hey, from your side, you're like, I'm talking to this guy, he's a manager
Mm-hmm.
at EY, mashallah, he's big. But I mean, at the same time, I'm like, there's not much difference. There's really not much difference here. The only difference here is that I've worked for 10 years. That's it. Right? I would almost argue if you work for 10 years, you'll be at my level. You could be much higher than my level,
No, I
ultimately. So
appreciate it. I appreciate it. But I really like the idea, and I appreciate your gratefulness. Even going back to how you mentioned that sometimes you'll just go on base and just say like, Alhamdulillah, I'm here, and it's really an opportunity. Personally, I really love to, and talk to me if you love this as well. Just being reflective of the fact of all the blessings that we get over here.
it's gratitude. It,
Mhm.
it, it really is gratitude. Alhamdulillah, it's easy to complain.
Mhm.
Honestly, it's so easy to complain. There's so many things in your own life, in my life, that could be better, right? But you look at the opposite, and you're like, we're here. First of all,
Mhm.
we have the opportunity to be here in this room, in terms, without having any fears in that. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot going on in the world, especially in Palestine, but also in Sudan, in Congo, in the Uyghur Muslims, and not just the Muslim population, but just general population. There's a
Mhm.
lot of oppression happening, right? We forget about Ukraine even sometimes,
Mhm.
just with all the other things that are happening. And you have to remember that we are lucky, we're blessed to be in a country where, one of my friends actually said, the ability to go and vote.
Yeah.
Just, have you thought about
Right.
the ability to go and vote for your own leader?
Mhm.
And yeah, it's one vote. In the grand scheme of things, are you really making that much of a difference? So on and so forth. But it makes a difference. It
Mhm.
makes a difference. And uh, yeah, I'm with you, man. The gratitude hits. That's what I was saying. When I come to the office, the gratitude really hits.
Right.
That I can't believe I'm amongst the ones who got the opportunity to work here.
Mhm. And sometimes, like, I promise I'm not joking. I really just sit down and I think, how would my life be if I got into my top 3 engineering choices and I accepted the offer and I never went to business, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I really just think of it as a domino effect. Okay, I went to engineering. I definitely wouldn't have the podcast. I probably wouldn't have a LinkedIn, so I wouldn't know half the people I know, right? And it just keeps going on and on and on. And then I'm like, oh my God, like, thank God I went into business. Thank God I am doing something that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
Speaking to people, learning about people, being able to share advice online. I really do love this aspect, and I appreciate how business is a little bit less technical and more so touching on your soft skills, refining that, because I feel that's, where my strength would lie per se.
Yeah.
And another aspect that I want to bring up is I have this one buddy. I really like, I ran a marathon with him on Sunday. I really, really love the dude. His name is Adam, right? And we always have this chat about how, you know, we genuinely have so many opportunities. We have all our limbs, we have all our fingers, we have our eyes, we have, we can drink water properly. There's people who need to take food via fluids,
Yeah.
right? And, just thankfully we have all these things, and the least we can do is try to use those gifts to help out other people and to, you know, build something amazing.
And that's really it, right? It's and honestly, I feel like that's a personal challenge for me, in terms of, I have the skill set. How can I use this to help support others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think of even something like Muslim charities. They might need an HR system, right?
Mm-hmm.
What services could I provide in that capacity, or what can I do? Because at the end of the day, someone, when people say, or if you think, hey, I have nothing to give, I say no. Like, you're not
Mm-hmm.
realizing what you might have. You just to think a bit more what it is that you need to, what it is that you have that you
Mm-hmm.
could provide. Maybe it's just your time. Maybe it's just physical strength, to your point about having the limbs to be able to, and the eyes to be able to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And uh that it, paying it forward matters. Paying it
Mm-hmm.
forward matters, and you'll realize that, especially when you go into corporate, in a sense that,
Right.
because what will happen is someone will train you, someone will spend the time for you to learn technical skills or client skills, and they'll invest in you, and they'll give you the opportunity for you to grow in your career, and it will also give you the opportunity to do the same when the
Mm-hmm.
time comes at the same time. So later on, right? So it is about paying it forward,
Mm-hmm.
and with ihsan, as you were saying.
Right.
It's about excellence wherever you are, in whatever capacity that you can do.
Mm-hmm. And I want to share one final story. So 3 years ago, I was going to my tutoring job, and right next to the tutoring job, there's a Popeyes. I really loved Popeyes at that time. Okay. So I go in, and at that time, I didn't have a debit card, right? So I just had like plain old cash.
Yeah,
And for some reason, they
I
jacked up the
lived there.
prices, right?
I
They
lived.
jacked up the prices. I was trying to get a Popeyes burger combo. Okay. So I go up to the counter. I'm like, okay, I have this much money. Can I get it? And they make it and everything. It comes time to pay, and I didn't have enough money.
Yeah,
Then the lady behind me, she's like, yo, it's totally okay. I'll pay it. And I was like, no, I feel bad. It's, you don't have to worry about it. But
yeah,
then she said something, just pay it forward. Right.
yeah,
And when I got home, it got me thinking that, okay, she helped me out. Obviously, now I'm going to want to help someone out. If I help someone out, that person's going to help someone out.
yeah.
So it's like a domino effect, right?
It
Like,
is.
as soon as you take the first step in being brave and helping out someone and paying for the 17-year-old kid who's in front of you, actually 16 probably, it really does make a difference. But I mean, with that, Qaza, I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate this podcast. It was fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing your insights.
No worries, Amar. Thank you for having me. Honestly, it's been my pleasure, having the opportunity to speak to you, and being here.
Of course. Thank you. And as for KKC Consulting, thank you so much. Please subscribe. I'm getting tired of getting so many views but no subscriptions. So please tune in for next week, and we'll see who the guest is. Thank you so much.